The fluorescent lights in the break room boost overhead, casting that familiar astral glow over the worn linoleum and beige counters. I'd been in this room 100 times before, grabbing a quick coffee while visiting my husband at work, chatting politely with his colleagues, blending into the background like a good spouse is supposed to. It wasn't my place. I was just Sarah, Richard's wife, and I liked it that way. Safe, predictable, but that day was different. The office was unusually quiet. I'd stopped by to drop off Richard's lunch. He'd forgotten it again, as he often did when his mind was preoccupied. He was in meetings all morning, so I figured I'd just leave it in the break room fridge with a sticky note and on my way. That was the plan anyway. I didn't expect to find Christopher there. He was sitting at the small round table by the vending machine, scrolling through his phone with a bottle of water in one hand. He looked up when I stepped in, and the moment our eyes met, something shifted, almost too subtle to notice, like a quiet chord in the background of a song you don't hear until you feel it. "Oh," he said, smiling. "Hey, Sarah." "Hi," I replied, trying to keep it light. "Just playing delivery girl again." He chuckled and stood, stretching his still frame. Christopher had always been friendly, polite, respectful, and a little more charming than I was comfortable admitting. He was younger than Richard, maybe mid-40s, with soft brown eyes and a calm, steady energy that made you feel like he really listened when you spoke. He was the type of man who didn't rush conversations, didn't talk over people. And even in a room as plain as this, his sense made everything feel just a little warmer. "Richard's in the war room," he said, nodding toward the hallway. "That budget meetings? Going to eat the rest of his day?" I smiled and shrugged. Then he'll thank us when he finally remembers food access. Christopher leaned back against the counter, arms folded, and watched me as I placed the lunch in the fridge. I could feel his gaze, not invasive or hungry, just curious, appreciative. I closed the fridge door and turned it around to find him still standing there, that quiet half smile on his face. "You always take such good care of him," I said softly. "He's lucky." I blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity in his voice. "It's just lunch," I said, waving it off. "No," he said, shaking his head. "It's not just lunch, it's everything." There was a pause, just long enough for the air to thicken. I wasn't sure how to respond, so I laughed. It was nervous light, meant to shake off whatever I thought I'd just heard. But Christopher didn't laugh. He just watched me, his expression unchanged. "I've seen the way you look at him," he said, stepping closer. "And I've seen the way he looks past you." That made me stop breathing for a second. I hadn't expected that. Not from him, not here, not now. I lowered my eyes, suddenly feeling exposed. "That's not really fair. I'm sorry," he said quickly, his voice gentle. "That was out of line." He stepped back, giving me space, and the moment broke. I should have walked away right then, thanked him, wished him a good day, and gone back to the life I knew. But I didn't. I stayed, maybe because part of me knew he wasn't entirely wrong. "You know," I said quietly, "sometimes I wonder if he even notices when I'm in the room." Christopher didn't respond right away. He just nodded as if he understood more than he should. Then he motioned to the coffee pot. "Do you have a mint?" "I could make us some coffee." I hesitated. Had nowhere to be really, just home, just errands. Still, this felt like dangerous ground thought, and yet there was something in his voice that didn't feel like danger. It felt like comfort. "Sure," I said. "Why not?" He poured the coffee in silence, handed me a cup without asking how I took it. He already knew. He'd made it for me for a few times when we ran into each other during visits. 1 cream, no sugar. I can't ever remember telling him that we sat at the table where he'd been before. The silence between us thick but not uncomfortable. Outside the break room, voices murmur down the hall, other lives continuing as usual. Inside it was just him and me and the faint scent of roasted coffee and powdered creamer. You okay? He asked softly, Dot. It was the way he said it that undid me, not out of obligation or politeness. A minute, and I wasn't sure how to answer back as the truth was no, I wasn't. Booty didn't know how to say that without sounding ungrateful for the life I had. I don't know. I whispered. I guess I've just forgotten what it feels like to be seen. His eyes didn't leave mine, and something in Heist's expression softened even more. Not pity, not sympathy, just quiet understanding. Then gently he reached across the table and took my hand. His touch was warm, grounding. I should have pulled away. I didn't. See you, Sarah, he said. I felt a rush of heat rise to my face, not just from embarrassment, but something deeper, more intimate, like a door had been unlocked inside me that I didn't know was closed. And all I could do was hold his gaze, wondering how a moment so small could feel so impossibly big. It was just a touch, just a hand on mine, but something had shifted and I couldn't ignore it. I should have walked away after that moment in the break room. I should have let go of Hishand, thanked him for the coffee, and gone back to pretending everything was fine. That's what I'd always done, smiled, nodded, swallowed things down, and kept moving forward like nothing ever cracked beneath the surface. But something about Christopher made it impossible to slip back into that quiet numbness. He didn't say anything more after he touched my hand. He didn't push. He just sat with me, his thumb brushing lightly over my skin, his eye soft and steady, like he could feel of everything I couldn't say. Eventually, I pulled my hand back slowly, my fingers trembling slightly. It should go. He nodded, standing with me, but didn't move toward the door. He gave him space, gave me time, Sarah, he said, just as I reached for his handle. I turned to him. If you ever need to talk about anything, I offered a small smile, not quite. A Blado met his eyes. Thank you, and I left. That should have been the end of it. Booty kept thinking about it. The way he'd looked at me, not like I was someone's wife, not like I was invisible or expected to play a part. He'd seen me, and once you've been truly seen, it's hard to go back to being unseen again. Days passed, then a week. I avoided visiting Richard at the office, not because I was scared of running into Christopher, but because I wasn't sure what I'd do if I didn't. I thought distance would help, but it didn't. If anything, the silence made it worse. I found myself reaching for my phone late at night, scrolling through old photos. Old messages. Richard had become distant over the years, not cruel, just distracted, always working, always focused on the next deal, the next meeting, the next thing. And somewhere along the way, Wes stopped talking about anything real. We loved each other in that quiet practice way long marriages often fall into. But love without connection becomes something else. Something hollow. One afternoon, I was in the grocery store when I saw Christopher in the produce section. My heart stopped. He was reaching for a bag of apples, completely unaware of me. I should have it turned around. I should have walked the other way, but something made me approach him instead. Good choice, I say, trying to sound casual. Fug apples are the best. He turned, startled, and then smiled. That same gentle smile I remembered. Sarah, he looked genuinely glad to see me, and the warmth in his voice and a rush through my chest. I wasn't sure he'd ever speak to me again, he said. I shrugged, nervously, toying with my shopping basket. I didn't know what to say. You don't own anything, he said. I thought about you. That admission, so quiet and honest, hit harder than I expected. I looked at him for a long moment before replying. Me too. We didn't linger. We talked for a few minutes, mostly about nothing. Recipes, grocery store renovations. Half tomatoes looked sad and underripe, but underneath every word there was tension. Not the kind that begged for drama or chaos. The quiet kind, the kind that feels like water pressing against a dam. As we were saying goodbye, he hesitated. Would you ever want to get a coffee, just to talk? I stared at him, unsure. It wasn't a date. He didn't say anything inappropriate. He wasn't asking for more, but we both knew what this was. A line, a possibility, a moment waiting to shift into something we couldn't undo. Still, I heard myself say, okay. We met the following week. A little cafe on the corner near the office, neutral ground, busy enough to feel safe, quiet now to feel personal. When I walked in, he was already there, seated near the window with 2 cups of coffee and that same look on his face, like I was the only thing in the room that mattered. We talked for over an hour, not about Richard, not about work, about ourselves. Childhood memories, things we missed, regrets we held close and never shared with anyone. He listened without interrupting, and when he spoke, it was never to fill the silence, it was to connect. At one point, he said something that stayed with me. You know what the worst kind of loneliness is? He asked, stirring his coffee. It's when you're laying next to someone every night and they don't really see you anymore. I didn't respond right away. I just stared down at my hands, feeling tears threatened behind my eyes. I know exactly what you mean, I whispered. He reached across the table again. Just like in the break room. This time I met his hand halfway. His fingers closed around mine, and we sat there like that in full view of strangers, with nothing overtly romantic happening, and yet everything between us burning just beneath the surface. It wasn't about attraction. Not just that. Anyway, it was about feeling something again, being known. And in that small cafe with the hum of people and dishes and low music in the background, I realized that I wasn't just connecting with Christopher, I was remembering myself, the woman I used to be before time softened the edges of my spirit, before I became someone people looked through instead of at. And he was the first person in a long time who made me want to feel alive again. After that day off the cafe, everything inside me felt different. I went home and stood in the kitchen for nearly half an hour, just staring at the countertops, listening. Tough, quiet hum of the refrigerator. It was like I didn't recognize my own life anymore. The same cabinets, the same coffee mugs, the same afternoon light pouring through the window. And yet, I felt like a stranger in it all. Richard came home late that night. He didn't notice the difference in me. He didn't notice much at all. He dropped his briefcase, kissed Mom on the cheek out of habit, and asked what was for dinner before disappearing into his office. That was our rhythm, familiar, predictable, and suddenly so heartbreakingly empty. I lay awake that night listening to him breathe beside me. I thought about how far apart we'd grown, how many years had gone by without real conversations, without looking each other in the eye and seeing one another. I wasn't angry at him. I wasn't even sad anymore, just tired. Tired of feeling invisible, tired of pretending. A few days passed before I heard from Christopher. Again, he texted me late one evening when the house was quiet, and I was alone with my thoughts. I hope this isn't crossing a line. I just keep thinking about you. I stared at the message for a long time. My heart was pounding. Not out of fear, but because I understood exactly what he meant. I had been thinking about him too, constantly. His voice, the way his eyes softened when he listened, the warmth of his hand in mine. It had been years since I'd felt something stir inside me like that. I wrote back simply, "You're not crossing a line." I understand. He didn't reply right away, but when headed, the message was short and tender. Then maybe we should talk again. We met at a small park on the edge of town. It was a cool morning and dew clung to the grass. The air smelled of leaves and earth, and everything felt quieter out there, like the world had slowed down just enough for me to breathe. Christopher was waiting near a bench, his hands in his jacket pockets. When he saw me, he smiled. Not the practice polite kind, but the real kind, the kind you give someone when you're genuinely happy they showed up. Thanks for coming, he said. I wasn't sure I would. I admitted, sitting beside him. You wasn't sure you should, he said quietly, but I'm glad you did. We sat in silence for a while, watching a few early joggers pass by. Somewhere nearby, birds chirped in. The trees and the sound made the whole scene feelingly cinematic, like we were an animament that would stay with us long after it was over. Do you think I'm a terrible person? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned to me, his brow furrowed. Why would I think that? Because I'm married, I said, because I'm here. Because part of me wants to be here. He didn't respond right away. Then he said, wanting to feel something that doesn't make you durable, it makes you human. That broke something open inside me. Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. He wasn't even sure what I was crying for. The years I'd lost, the woman I'd buried beneath routine and expectations, or the terrifying realization that I might still have more to feel, more to live within. I'd let myself believe. Christopher moved closer, slowly, giving me space to pull away if I wanted, but I didn't. He brushed a tear from my cheek with his thumb. You deserve to be seen, Sarah, to be wanted, not just tolerated. His words struck deep. No one had spoken to me like that in years. I looked at him, really looked, his face so close, his expression so honest it scared me, and I realized I wasn't afraid of him. I was afraid of what he represented. A doer, a choice, a truth I tried so long to ignore. When his hand touched mine again, I didn't pull away, and when he leaned in, I met him halfway. The kiss was gentle, hesitant, even like another of us wanted to break the moment or make it into something it wasn't. It wasn't about passion. Not then. It was about tenderness, about two people finding something next in the quiet wreckage of their lives. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I don't want to hurt you, he whispered. You haven't? I said, you've reminded me I'm still alive. We didn't make any promises. We didn't talk about what would happen next. We just sat there for a long time, letting stillness speak for us, letting each in our chests say what words couldn't. When we finally stood to leave, he whipped me to my car, but didn't follow. Just stood there as I got in, his hands in his pockets again, watching me with eyes that said more than he ever cowled. I drove away with tears on my cheeks and a warmth in my chest I hadn't felt in years. I didn't know what this was becoming. It just knew I couldn't forget the way him and me feel, and part of me didn't want to. I didn't see Christopher for almost 2 weeks after the morning in the park, not because I didn't want to, and not because he didn't try, but because it needed to sit with what had happened, with what we had done, and what it meant. I spent most of those days in a quiet fog, floating through my routines with a strange sense of calm and confusion tangled together. It wasn't guilt that kept me up at night. It was something else, something harder to name. A part of me had come back to life. And on sale, feel that kind of awakening, pretending to sleepwalk again, back a mess unbearable. Richard didn't notice the change. He was still working late, still skipping dinners, still talking about deadlines and clients and expansion plans. I'd sit across from him at the table some nights and study his face. The familiar lines, the thinning hair, the way he chewed without thinking. I remembered loving him fiercely once, and I think in some way I still did, but it wasn't the kind of love that followed you up anymore. It was the kind that kept you from sinking, and I didn't want to stay afloat. I wanted to feel the waves again. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Christopher finally reached out again. Not with questions or pressure, just afido of the lake near the park. We'd been to the water calm and bright under sun, and a single message. Been thinking about that day. About you. I stared at the message for what felt like forever. Then, without overthinking it, I replied, "Me too." He suggested a walk. No cafe, no expectations, no pressure, just a walk. I said yes. We met near the trailhead, both of us quiet at first. The day was warm, but not stifling, the kind of late spring afternoon that wrapped air in her skin like a soft blanket. The trees were full, the sky wide and open dot. It felt like the world was giving you a space. We didn't talk about Richard. We didn't talk about right or wrong. We talked about our childhoods, about movies that made us cry, about the kinds of music we used to dance to when no one was watching. We talked like two people who had been waiting for someone to ask the kinds of questions that actually mattered. At one point, he stopped walking and turned to me. "Can I ask you something?" He said. "Of course. Do you regret what happened between us?" The air shifted around us. I felt the weight of his question settle in my chest. "No," I said without hesitation. "I regret that I went so long not feeling anything." "But not that," he exhaled, visibly relieved. "Neither do I." We kept walking. Then we stopped again when we reached a small clearing, a place where the trees opened and sunlight poured through in golden streams. He took my hand and I let him. There was no urgency, no reckless desperation, just warmth, presence, connection. He kissed me again, not like the first time, hesitant and unsure. This time was fuller, deeper, not rushed, not aggressive, just a quiet claim of the space between us. I wrapped my arms around his shoulders and held him, feeling the rhythm of his breath against mine. And in that moment, he wasn't someone's wife. I wasn't some mean-ass afterthought. I was a woman. A woman who had spent years forgetting what it felt like to be chosen. We sat on a bench under the trees afterward, saying nothing for a long time. "I don't know where this goes," he said eventually, "and I know it's complicated, but I wanted you to know I care about you." This wasn't just a moment to me. My throat tightened. It wasn't to me either. He looked at me, then really looked, and something passed between us that didn't need to be spoken. Understanding, respect, emotion, all of it tangled together. When the sun began to dip behind the trees, we stood up knowing we had to return to our lives. But we didn't make promises. We didn't write fairy tales. We just accepted that something real had happened between us, and that whatever came next would come honestly. That night, lying in bed beside Richard, I didn't feel guilt. I felt sadness for the years we'd spent. Insolence, for the love that faded not because of betrayal, but because of neglect. Sadness that we'd let each other slip away without even noticing. And also, I felt clarity in the days that followed. I began to ask myself questions I'd avoided for too long. What do I want from the years I have left? What do I need to feel whole? What does love look like when it isn't just loyalty but truth? I didn't rush to answer them, but I let them sit with me. Christopher and I didn't become some whirlwind romance. We didn't run away or destroy anything, but we stayed connected. We talked. We saw each other in small, meaningful ways. We let whatever this was become something natural, something built on honesty, not secrecy. And most of all, I began to come back to myself. It wasn't just about him. It was about waking up. It was about remembering that life doesn't stop at 50, that hearts didn't expire, that desire, connection, tenderness, they don't vanish with time. They wait quietly, patiently, until someone reminds you they're still there. So, if you're listening, if you're wondering whether you've disappeared beneath the roles you play, you haven't, and maybe, just maybe, someone will come along when you least expect it. Someone who doesn't save you, but sees you the way Christopher saw me. And in that seeing, you might just find yourself